Sure.
Well, everyone, welcome back to another very exciting episode of the Storybox podcast. Today, my friends, I'm delighted to welcome someone whose research has helped me and my family in more ways than one. Now, some of you may know that my dad had a cancer diagnosis very recently. He had his surgery at the time of recording this yesterday, and he's recovering in hospital. But my guest today is the world-renowned Dr. William Li. Now, for those of you that don't know who this incredible man is, he's a physician, he's a scientist, he's president and medical director of the Angiogenesis Foundation, and he's the best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author of Eat to Beat Disease, the new science of how your body can heal itself. And you can also join his incredible masterclasses for free at that, which is at his website. I'll make sure everyone knows where to go to, but it's drwilliamli.com/masterclass. But Dr. Li, can I welcome you so much to Storybox Podcast today?
Well, thank you very much, Jay. It's really a pleasure to be part of this. Thank you.
It's really an honor to have you on the show today. I've been listening to some of your other conversations you've had with many different other podcasters. I love your conversation with Dr. Rangan Chatterjee as well. I wish that one went longer. That was my only complaint. But I am so grateful for your time and your willingness to be on my show today. My very first question for you is a question that I love starting off all my conversations with, which is, what does success look like for you?
Oh, well, listen, on a personal level, I think that success is has got to be imbued with satisfaction. Like, you've got to feel, I have to feel really good about what I'm doing. I mean, one can pursue a number of activities and reach the milestones or the checkbox, but if it isn't something that really feels good to you, for me, I don't call that success. Because success is really when there's something I want to do that I've actually worked towards doing that is successful, let's say, by almost any criteria. But the one that's most important to me is whether I get a personal satisfaction out of it. And then, honestly, a litmus test for me is whether or not I want to talk about it afterwards. Because, if I'm passionate about something, it's not really just talking about the milestone or the mark or the success. It's really talking about what I've learned during the process. Because I think that for many activities, endeavors, in which one could be successful, it's really the learning. It's the journey that you take forward with you, not just the destination.
Why are you passionate about the medical field, and more specifically diving into this sort of research in cancer prevention and trying to beat diseases?
I take my interest in medicine going all the way back when I was a kid. I was, I don't know, I probably was 7 years old, maybe not even that. And my mother actually had an arrhythmia, so a unusually fast heart rate. My father was at work, and I literally was so scared I thought she was going to die. And one of our family friends, who's a doctor, came over to see her. I made a house call, and using, through his expertise, and I watched really with my eyes riveted. I think all of my senses were on alert, and he was able to actually get her heart rate down. She didn't have to go to the hospital. Everything turned out okay. And I do distinctly remember that was a really formative moment where I realized that without any knowledge, you have a ton of fear when it comes to your health. With knowledge and expertise, suddenly you could actually not only reduce that fear and do something, but you could actually reduce the fear in other people as well. And so I always wanted to be a medical doctor. My mother, as an artist, she's a pianist. My father's a scientist. He's an engineer. They're both retired, but they kind of imbued in me a love of arts and sciences. So kind of the creative and the logical side. And although they seem like very different parts of the brain, I pursued education and hobbies and everything else that kind of blended them. And as it relates to medicine, here's what I always think really works well for me with that background. Science leads the way when it comes to progress in medicine. But there is so much in medicine that we don't have answers for. A great example is the recent coronavirus. I mean, when COVID hit, we knew nothing about it. And so medicine had nothing to offer. It was a great example of how, no matter how thick our textbooks are and how skilled we may be from our training, there may come a time, maybe more often than we think, where we are really in thin air. And for me, when I come to those points with healing and medicine where the knowledge kind of dissipates, that's where, or when there's a brick wall, you just don't know where to go next. That's where I'm actually able to kick into the creative side to go around the obstacles to see if I can find a different solution besides the one that one might expect. And that's how I pursue my research. How I got into food and medicine is that actually I spent more than 30 years actually doing drug development in biotechnology. And my field is called angiogenesis. Angio is blood vessels. Genesis is growth. And angiogenesis is literally how the body grows blood vessels. We have 60,000 miles worth of grown blood vessels in the typical adult body. And these are the highways and byways that deliver oxygen and nutrients from what we eat to all of our cells and organs. Now, I was very excited by looking at angiogenesis and its problems when there's a problem of blood vessels as a common denominator in disease. And so that led through my nonprofit organization to the successful development of just a few weeks ago, 42 FDA approved treatments for cancer, diabetes complications, and vision loss. So, it was, those, I would say, all great examples of success. Each one was a big milestone, very successful, but I learned a lot from that. And this is, again, along the lines of our conversation. What did I learn from it? I mean, I obviously was very satisfied being able to help develop something that can help people. But what I am even more passionate about is the insights that the body actually knows how to heal itself. The drugs that we develop just try to tip your body further in that direction. Okay. And after, I probably had maybe a dozen new treatments that have been developed. I mean, where do you go next after that? I started realizing that treating disease was missing the biggest opportunity, which is to prevent disease in the first place. And if you're going to talk about prevention, you really can't talk about drugs, pharmaceuticals. You have to talk about something that's safer, more accessible, less expensive, and that people, don't kind of dread. Well, most people don't want to take medicines, but food is something that is widely available, that's easy to incorporate into your everyday life. And so I began realizing that the big challenge with food and health is that there seemed to be so little research at the level that we are accustomed to for medicines when it comes to evidence, scientific evidence. So I literally started to throw foods into the same experimental systems for drug development. So I started studying food as medicine, and that opened my eyes to this entirely new world that, right hidden in plain sight are all these natural sources of health stimulants and activators that could do a huge amount for us by preventing disease in the first place.
I want to get to what sort of foods help prevent diseases in just a moment. And I didn't mention in the intro that because you were just speaking about COVID-19 research, you're one of the leading people in research into COVID-19, which itself is a disease. It's pretty nasty if you've ever had it. There's different strains of it, obviously. But I'm curious that I guess understanding where disease really comes from, where does disease really originate? And secondly, how can we prevent it? I know the first one might be a complicated kind of question because it's pretty much always been around, hasn't it?
Well, it's interesting. I would try to simplify things for your audience to say, when we are born, our body is hardwired to protect our health and to resist disease. We have all the tools we need to live our entire life illness-free. Okay. And these are our health defense systems, which medicines try to resurrect and to help along, and foods can activate them as well. Broadly speaking, when you want to look at disease, now, I'm a physician, I'm a medical doctor, internal medicine. I take care of men and women, young and old, healthy and sick. I can tell you that most doctors are trained, as I was, to identify and characterize and treat disease and pursue disease. A much more challenging question that I wondered about when I actually was in medical school still is, how do you define health? And health, I used to always say, well, how do you know you're healthy? Well, I know I'm healthy because I'm not sick. Well, health has got to be more than the absence of illness, absence of disease. And the reason is it's very difficult to operationally do something based on the absence of something else, right? That's basically spinning your wheels in midair. That we're like, what can you do about health, right? And that's what led me to reconceptualize and look at all the scientific data and realize that, what? Health isn't just the absence of disease. It's the result of our body's health defense systems firing on all cylinders at work for us from the time we're born to our very last breath. There's 5 health defenses: our circulation, angiogenesis, our stem cells that we're born with, our gut microbiome. It's this whole ecosystem. I use the Great Barrier Reef as an analogy of this complex ecosystem that's beautiful in and of itself, but that when it's disrupted, bleached, so to speak, you wind up actually having like terrible consequences to the environment of the gut, of the leaking, of your brain, of your healing, of your metabolism. So your gut health is absolutely important. DNA, much more than a genetic code, and our immune system is a huge protector of our health. And when it comes to disease, because you asked, what is disease? Where does it come from? I would say disease comes from outside of the body. So a virus or bacteria could easily come at us, or disease can come from inside the body, an invader or a failure inside the body. However, when our health defenses are working at their optimum, think about it like a car. Your automobile is so complicated, and yet all we have to do is to open the door and sit in it, turn it on, and we can just go and not have to think about its workings. That's how the human body is. And as you can imagine, if you have a problem with your rotor, your clutch, your, spark plugs, any aspect starts to have a problem, suddenly all attention gets focused on the problem because you're not going to be running really well. And that's why focusing on our body's health defense systems is really one of the most important things we can do throughout our entire lives.
Is having natural immunity to certain diseases far superior than having actual medications?
Well, here's the interesting thing. You use the word immunity, which is appropriate. Our immune system is a health defense system, but there's a broader kind of holistic view of immunity, which is, how do we stay away from cancer? How do we stay away from heart disease? How do we stay away from diabetes? Because in the literary sense, if we were immune from some of these most feared conditions, obesity, diabetes, cancer, dementia, heart disease, stroke, we'd be living to a ripe old age, which is what many people want to live in. But think about it. Chronology, time is not the only factor. Quality plus time is where the money's at. We want to live long and prosper, right? And so you don't want to just live a long time suffering. And so I think this is another aspect of how to actually think about our immunity. Let's call it something different. Let's call it resilience, because we're all going to get a little sick. And we're all going to get a little better. What we want to do is to have that kind of resilience so deep in our body, so intractable as we go through our life journey, that essentially we become impervious, let's call it, to some of the most feared illnesses.
Do you believe that in today's day and age that more and more people are getting sicker with these, I guess you could call them diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's disease, obesity, heart disease, all these diseases, and even, I guess, other ones too. Do you believe that we're becoming more and more sick? I want to say yes,
but I want to also make sure for your audience, I'm giving kind of the right context to things. I think that as our population swells and ages, we are, worldwide dealing with more challenges of aging. And as our cells get older and our health defenses, also start to wear down, it's up to us to actually take the responsibility to shore them back up. And so, yes, while I do think that there is a greater burden of chronic diseases like cancer, heart disease, lung diseases, obesity, diabetes, dementia, kind of on all of our shoulders, sort of in humanity, at the same time, we have greater, let's say, awareness and greater empowerment to do something about it. So more of us could live longer, because that's the other thing that's happening, is that more people are living longer as well. Now, I'm going to throw one curveball into sort of how we think about the burdens of illness, is that, our climate is really suffering. Yeah. And as the thin blue line that defines the habitable, what makes Earth habitable, which is our atmosphere, starts to degrade inevitably. I mean, we see pictures of the icebergs falling down and the sea levels rising, the flora and fauna changing. But really, what it also does is put us at much greater risk for illness as well. And so I think that, something that I've been spending quite some time ruminating on is how our responsibility to the entire planetary health, including our climate and our environment, is ultimately going to be well aligned with our own individual health as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that front. And I think that here's a question that I've been curious about. And I've heard a lot of people say that it is a disease. Do you believe that age is really a disease?
That is such an interesting question. I've heard this as well. I have some friends who study aging. Dr. David Sinclair's, who's from Australia, is a friend of mine and a brilliant researcher at Harvard. And I know some others, folks as well. I kind of don't like to think about aging as a disease. I like to think about kind of aging as part of a biological clock. And it can be happening at the level of an individual cell within our body. We've got about 40 trillion cells, or it could be happening at the organ level, or it could be happening at the organismic level. We're a gigantic organism. And so part of the cycle of aging makes you think about renewal. And so what I'm actually really interested in, and foods can do this, by the way, is how do we regenerate our health? How do we regenerate our body? Because in fact, we're in a continuous process of renewal. So if I told you that a baby is born, and when that baby is born, if you look in the bone marrow, there are 750 million extra stem cells. So these stem cells were originally used to build the baby, right? When mom's egg met dad's sperm in the womb, after a few days, it's just a bunch of stem cells forming, and the face gets formed, and the ear gets formed, and the liver gets formed, and the brain gets formed, et cetera. When the baby comes out at 9 months, there's overage, extra stem cells. Those get packed away in the bone marrow, and they continuously are called out during the course of our lives, over 80 some years, typically. And they are actually rebuilding and renewing and regenerating ourselves. So what is aging besides the number of candles on your birthday, if you don't take into account that we have the intrinsic capacity to renew ourselves from the inside out? And could we be generating more, coaxing more, preserving better the renewal of our body? There's this big fight, right? We pull out the big swords and pull out and kind of create big guns to try to knock down the deterioration of cells. And that's sort of like the fountain of youth. I'm going to live to 200 years old, or, people articulate it like that. I have a different viewpoint, and I come at this as a scientist. Well, what if we reconceptualize aging, not as slowing down the process of the clock, the calendar, but what if we actually approach vitality by stimulating renewal? Can we regenerate ourselves more? Would that allow us to actually allow our younger selves at any point in time catch up and overtake our older selves? So I leave that for you to think about.
It is very interesting for me to think about, because I have listened to Dr. David Sinclair and so many times, and it's just made me even more curious to dive further into it. I mean, because on one level, a person, say, around 50 to 60 years old, they could get early onset Alzheimer's or dementia, which that can happen. But then, say, for example, another person a lot younger, they won't get certain illnesses. I don't know if I'm making too much sense here, but like, it just interests me, like, is age, or does age play a factor, or is there something else that's going on? Like, for example, say someone that is a young person, they end up with cancer compared to an older person that you would think that cancer or Alzheimer's would happen to them, but it doesn't. So I don't know if this is making any sense at all. My brain just going a million miles an hour.
No, it totally makes sense. Let me tell you how I think about it. Our health defenses keep us vital at any time in our life. And as we get older, we're accumulating insults and injuries to our health defenses. And so as we get older, our defenses kind of just wear down a little bit more. And the wear down, the damage can be cumulative. And this is why I'm really now doing some really deep dives on how can we eat foods that restore, support, buttress, activate our health defenses, so that as we age, we are allowing our own body's system to try to do that job of fending off illness. By the way, you know that why very young people, I mean, some children do get cancer, unfortunately, but it's actually much less common than adults get cancer. So children almost never get colon cancer, as an example. Well, one of the reasons is that our body's health defenses, the angiogenesis system, our blood vessels, are hardwired to prevent cancers from getting nutrition. And that's really robust when we're actually a kid. The other thing is that as a child, our immune system is uniquely fortified to be able to search out and destroy and wipe out any microscopic cancers that might form. Our DNA hasn't accumulated the damage of 50 or 60 years of continuous summers of sunshine, of drinking beer, eating ultra-processed foods, being exposed to, perfluorocarbons in the environment, the off-gassing from the carpet, all the things that, we accumulate in our life that weaken our health defenses. And so our genetics are stronger, defending us. Our gut health is more native, not yet changed and altered by harms in the environment. So, children wind up actually, in general, like, they get sniffles, they get colds, but in general, they don't get those chronic diseases. And what I'm really looking at is that as we get older, these chronic diseases that we all fear, and that, some people, think, well, I guess if I'm getting older, I'm going to get diabetes, or I would tell you that if you focus less on the specter of disease and focus more on the opportunity to support your health, your own health, as you get older, to, in some ways sort of take a countermeasure against all the things that have accumulated in your life that might take down your health defenses. That's an opportunity to do something proactive rather than react to something that you might fear.
Yeah. I guess where my mind was going with it too, that I didn't probably explain, is if you've got like a really, really healthy person, doesn't matter what age they're at, and they suddenly end up with cancer, for example. I mean, they did everything that they thought was right. They ate properly. They had medications. They got everything they needed to, but suddenly, I guess, would you say that has something to do more with DNA? Because I've heard somewhere, for example, cancer, I've heard that we've all got cancer cells in our body. It's just been activated at a particular point in time. Why is that the case if someone is being extremely healthy? Has it got more to do with genes or angiogenesis, that sort of thing?
All the above. I mean, so we are all made of trillions of cells, estimated 40 trillion cells. That's more cells in your body than the stars you could see in the night sky out there. And the reality is that every time those cells divide to multiply, which is how we stay alive, it's what our body does. Every time they divide at the scale of 40 trillion, a few are going to make mistakes. Those mistakes are called mutations. Those abnormal cells, those mutated cells, if one or two mutations occur, you got a microscopic cancer. But they cannot grow because your body's angiogenesis system withholds the ability for them to grow blood vessels. So that's a protective thing. And then your immune system is able to spot those microscopic cancers and eliminate them. I sort of liken the immune ability to wipe out microscopic cancers that are forming all the time, like a pimple in your body, like a police officer, a cop on a beat, driving through a neighborhood and seeing a drug dealer on a corner. Before that person's caused any problems, you pick them up, put them in the squad car, and take them away. Okay. And that's basically how cancer is dealt with normally. Now you can imagine over the course of, and of course, genetics can play a role. By the way, do you know that for cancer, the genetic component of cancer, the true inherited components of cancer, only plays about 5 to 10% of a role. 90% is our environment and our lifestyle. So what happens as we get older? So those invisible cancers, when you're 5 years old, when you're 20 years old, when you're 30 years old, you get wiped out. What happens is that when you get to your 50s and 60s and 70s, you're entering into this tunnel where all of a sudden the risks of lethal diseases start to go sky high. Usually it's because your body's lost the ability or some of the ability to cut off the blood supply to the cancer. Your body's immune system is not quite as reliable in finding those microscopic cancers. Your gut microbiome changes, which changes the immune system. And so again, back to our defenses, the simplest things that we can do is to treat our body's health defenses as well as possible. Stay away from the things that hurt it and more things that actually support it.
What sort of foods should we stay away from to prevent diseases making even more impact on our health?
Right. So, my work has really focused on what do we add to our body to enhance our defenses. And in general, what you add to the body, the good news is that there's more than 200 foods that support your health defenses. So it becomes an act of pleasure and joy, sort of in food cultures, to be able to eat foods that you enjoy that actually promote your health. That said, all the research has shown that there are some patterns of food or types of food that if you eat them consistently, over the course of your lifetime, or maybe even over the course of a year, are very likely to damage your body's health defenses. When your defenses go down, you become more vulnerable. The invaders that can come in and all kinds of havoc, chaos can happen to your health. All right. So what are some of those harmful patterns of food that have been discovered? Well, the things that I think many of us have heard about: red meat, eating a lot of it. A little bit's okay. A lot of it's not okay. Saturated fats, lots of saturated fats, ultra processed meats. The World Health Organization considers ultra processed meats a carcinogen, actually. So that's been attributed to have cancer. I would say ultra processed foods. So I know that when you walk into a grocery store, you go to the fresh sections of the foods aisle and everything is fresh. And of course, even then we want to avoid chemicals and pesticides if we can. You go to the middle aisles, we're told to stay out of the middle aisles. I say there are treasures in the middle aisles. You want to go for the middle aisle. But what you do want to do when you see a packaged food, a box, a can, a jar, a bottle, you want to pick it up. You want to take a look at the ingredients. You want to read those ingredients, because if there's 20 or more ingredients, or there are words, tongue twisting words that you can't pronounce, or if the food is something that, and this is actually quite true, that your grandmother would not recognize as a food in the box, it's probably got the chemicals, ultra processed chemicals that are not so good for you. Other foods that are bad for you, excess amounts of alcohol, not good for you. Artificial sweeteners, not good for your gut microbiome, your gut bacteria, which then damage your immune system and your metabolism as well. Those are probably the biggest offenders. And, some people want to throw sugar on there, and that's easy to misinterpret. Our body needs sugar. The most sugar avid part of our body is our brain. Everybody wants to have a good brain. You need a lot of sugar. Your body needs it. Foods can provide us sugar, and things that are besides candy and cakes actually are sources of sugars, including not just fruits, but vegetables as well, often have sugar in it. So natural sugars that come in whole foods, generally for most people are perfectly fine to have. The kinds of sugars that you want to avoid that damage your health defenses, like stun your stem cells and reduce your immunity and wreck your microbiome, are added sugars, like a can of soda that has 10 teaspoons of refined sugars added to it each time. Like, if you took an empty cup, an empty glass, and just went to your sugar bowl and you just put 10 heaping teaspoons into the cup and said, here, go ahead, swallow that. You're not going to do it. And if somebody dissolved it and you knew what was in there, you probably wouldn't drink it either. And yet billions of people are drinking these cans of soda without realizing that is called excess added sugar that damages your health defenses. So many good things to eat that come from food cultures. And then, like that kind of short list that I just talked about, want to cut down or cut out.
I also, when I go shopping, I look at the back and the ingredients list and I read them out. I think it's also being informed, like doing the research, reading books like yours to actually know the kind of ingredients that are in certain foods that are going to do damage to you. And I like how you also mentioned the artificial sweeteners. They actually trick your brain to think and they make you more hungry. So you go and eat more and more sugary treats and beverages and that sort of thing. And I also found out that juices, like those juices that you get in the shop, you got to look at it from the perspective and it says like a 5-star health star rating. I don't know if you've got those in America. They have them here in Australia, but they're not 5-star healthy rating, because what they're doing is they're getting how many apples and they're squeezing how many apples, plus they're adding excess sugar on top of that. So it's end up being 10 times worse than saying having like a soda or something like that. But people don't realize it because they're like, oh, it's fruit, it's fine for you.
Look, the one of my favorite foods is loaded with natural sugar, which is in the summertime a juicy peach. An incredibly juicy peach. Like when I dream about juicy peaches, and it's got quite a lot of sugar in it. So I don't eat a lot of them. But here's the thing: when you eat even a very sweet fruit, you are not only getting the fructose, which is a natural form of sugar, which is nowhere near the amount you get into a soda, but you're also getting a lot of bioactives, natural chemicals that come from the fruit itself, from Mother Nature. You're eating, and you're also getting a lot of dietary fiber. Let me tell you how important dietary fiber is. Another fruit that I love that's quite sweet is a juicy pear. Is also when it's in season is amazing. Okay, well, a study came out recently that was published in a major journal, medical journal, a scientific journal, that looked at 200 some patients with melanoma, skin cancer, being treated with the latest cancer therapy called immune therapy. Now, immunotherapy is one of the most natural cancer treatments you can think of, because it actually uses your body's own defenses to attack and wipe out cancer, not chemo. All right. And literally, including in my mother's case, you can take people with metastatic cancer and wipe out all of their cancer because their own immune system is capable to do this. Remember, we talked about that. Your immune system has that power to clean your body of cancer cells. With immunotherapy and cancer, though, unfortunately, only about 20% of people respond, which is shockingly low. Wow. So for those 20%, if they respond, it's a eureka. I mean, it seems like a miracle. I'll tell you, some of the saves that I've seen, including my own mother, who had metastatic endometrial cancer, who have had immunotherapy, and in my mother's case, only 3 treatments over every 3 weeks. So 3 treatments over 9 weeks, never had chemo. And her 80-year-old body wiped out all of this metastatic cancer. And today, almost 10 years later, she's never had any cancer come back. And she's always been off treatment and living her life. And so I never thought I would see that in my medical career. That just seemed like a dream, but it's here. All right. Now, here's the thing. Only 20% of people respond in that manner, or maybe even less. So the study that came out that was published, so important, it was by the MD Anderson Cancer Center, one of the major academic medical centers, cancer centers in the United States, and the National Institutes of Health. So, one of the country's largest medical research funder. And they found that when they looked at the difference between responders and non-responders, the people who responded had one bacteria that the people who didn't respond did not have. It's called ruminococcus, gut microbiome, one of our health defenses. And then they asked, what were these people eating? And they found that the people who had ruminococcus also were eating a lot of dietary fiber, which feeds your gut microbiome, which is one of your health defenses, which talks to your immune system, which wipes out cancer. All right. Now, how much, and they were able to do this calculation, and they found how much fiber people needed to eat while they were getting treatment to actually improve their chances of responding. And they found that 5 grams of dietary fiber per day lowered the risk of cancer progression, cancer growth, or mortality by 30%. For every 5 grams of dietary fiber you eat, you lower the risk of mortality by 30%, or your ability to cancer to grow. Now, how much is 5 grams of fiber, right? Like, that's, everybody just wants to know, like, okay, doc, just give it to me straight. Like, how much food is that? You get about 5 grams of fiber in a medium-sized pear. That, to me, is so stunning that we didn't know that in the cancer treatment world. So this isn't food replacing medicine. This is food and medicine working together. Quite spectacular.
Wow. That is incredible. What other foods have the ability that have a lot of fiber in it? And what other foods that you know of? I've heard you talk about kiwi fruits as well. That's pretty much a superfood. What other foods should we be actually adopting into our diets to prevent ourselves from getting cancer or other diseases?
Yeah, well, there are more than 200 different foods out there, and there's more being discovered literally on a weekly basis. So, for any of your audience who wants to, stay on top of this, this is where what I talk about in my masterclasses, they can come to my website, sign up with my newsletter. It's drdrwilliamlee.com. I love, part of my mission is to get the word out about these foods. And so it's not like, what are the 5 foods, or what's the one food that we all need to eat? Honestly, I'll give you the general pattern of foods, and I'll give you some of my favorites. Okay. So the general pattern is mostly whole plant-based diet. Doesn't be all plant-based, but mostly plant-based. And the whole part of it is actually quite important, because you're not getting just a dietary supplement, and you're not getting the ultra processed part of it. You're really getting the stuff that, that you would see in a farmer's market or in a grocery store that's fresh, and you would bring it home. And just like, sort of the cultures of the generations past, you just cut it up and cook it in the kitchen, and you go shopping a couple of times a week, and you eat freshly prepared food. That mostly whole plant-based foods, healthy fruits and vegetables, nuts, tree nuts, and legumes and grains, healthy fats and healthy oils. So that would be like omega-3 fats from seafood. I know that when I visited Australia, I really had an amazing experience tasting dishes made with different types of fish that I would not get in the United States. It was a real treat for me to actually explore, especially shellfish of different sorts. And they actually have omega-3 fatty acids, which is a good fat. And then olive oil is really an amazingly healthier oil that has many, many benefits for your health. And then our herbs and spices are also good. So, I think that if you build your diet around that, and make that, let's say 85, maybe 90% of how you'd characterize your regular eating, then, if you're going to be eating a few things outside of that realm that are treats for you, your body's going to be just fine. It can handle it. It's resilient. Some of my favorites, I love berries. Of all sorts, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries. I put that in one category. I drink green tea every single day. Now, green tea is not one type of tea. There's sencha, there's matcha, there's jasmine tea, there's longjing tea. There's all these different kinds. I take great pleasure in sampling different types, and it's calming to me. And I know it lowers cholesterol, it lowers body weight, it fights cancer, starves cancer by cutting off the blood supply. Lots of good things. That's something that I really enjoy. Speaking of beverages, I used to live in Italy, and I did a gap year there, and I always drink an espresso or two a day. Coffee has something called chlorogenic acid that activates all of your body's health defense systems. Research has shown, by the way, that organic coffee has more chlorogenic acid than conventionally ground coffee. And so, I'm always on the lookout for that now. I love leafy greens. So, beyond the old adage of kale and broccoli, I love chard. I love to look at different types of watercress. I look at spinach. It's about exploration. It's really about diversity. By the way, something interesting about spinach is it's a great source of nitrogen because it grows low to the soil, absorbs a lot of nitrogen from the soil. When you eat spinach and you chew it, the microbiome on your tongue interacts with the nitrogen from the soil and converts it into a form. When you swallow, it gets absorbed in your stomach as nitric oxide. Nitric oxide dilates blood vessels, lowers blood pressure, which protects you from stroke. And it also calls out stem cells to repair your body as part of your health defense. So that's another example of a leafy green that's got a lot of benefits as well. And then, I would say I do enjoy seafood. I love I love a whole range of seafood. I'm honestly, I do enjoy salmon every now and then, but I'm not a big salmon fan. I'll eat it every now and then. Tuna, it's a big fish. I don't eat it very often because it can have mercury in it. Yeah. But I love exploring lots of other types of fish. For lunch today, I made some little baby gnocchis with a tomato pesto, a little sprinkling of oregano. And then I literally did what they do in Spain, which is about as easy as you can do. I took out of my pantry a tin of marinated octopus. It wasn't very expensive. It was been sitting in my pantry for a few months. I took it out, opened it up. I took some of that lovely juice. I poured it over the gnocchi and the tomato pesto. And then I literally just put out a couple of chunks on it. And I had that. Now, octopus has got omega-3 fatty acids as well. It's not just salmon. And so, I enjoy exploring and sampling shellfish as well.
Dr. Lee, you're making me hungry. I mean, we got some.
Come over to my house.
I've got to now, honestly, where we can cook some amazing food together. Seriously, because
I love to do it.
Some of the best food here in Sydney, Australia is the seafood. I love it. I love a salmon every once a week or something like that. Not so often because you like you mentioned the mercury. Would you believe, Dr. Lee, this is crazy. I used to eat a 1 kilo bag of spinach a day, probably too much spinach, but because I love the stuff. I used to eat it like chips. It was pretty bad. But now I just have like a little handful. And
so I'll tell you a great way. So spinach is really unique because it's large in volume when it's raw, but it's tiny in volume when it's cooked. And one of the things that I love to do with spinach, I mean, it's perfectly fine in a salad. But I like variety and I like flavors. And so if you take some extra virgin olive oil, so take a Spanish olive oil made with picual olives, very high in polyphenols, and you saute with a little bit of garlic. Okay. And then you literally, before the garlic turns brown, you don't want to burn it, you drop the spinach in. The spinach will start to cook down like literally in seconds, like within a minute. If you keep turning it, it'll just wilt down. And then something I learned in some of my travels that's really interesting is take some chili pepper flakes, throw a few of those in there, take some pine nuts that you toast. It's a tree nut, got lots of dietary fiber and healthy nut fats, and throw that in there and take some golden raisins. And you can then mix that together with the spinach. And now you've created a warm salad that's got all these other ingredients. That's a complement to the, to the cold salad of spinach.
I'm definitely going to try this now, next time that I cook. This sounds so delightful, honestly. And I like how you mentioned the extra virgin olive oil has a lot of polyphenols in it. I was speaking with another doctor the other day who was talking about how certain olive oils, the extra virgin one, has a ton of polyphenols in it, and it reduces the risk of you actually getting cancer, or can cure cancer too. That was a fascinating conversation. But Dr. Lee, I am mindful of your time. I really do appreciate you making so much time for me today. 2 quick final questions for you, if that's all right with you. Where can people get a copy of your brand new book, and where do you want people to go for these masterclasses as well? I believe it's all on your website.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, my book is called Eat to Beat Disease. Eat to Beat Disease. And by the way, the real, that's the headliner title. The real essence of the book is the subtitle, which is The New Science of How Your Body Can Heal Itself. That's really where all the secrets are. When it comes to food and health, it's not just about the food. It's also as much about the body, how the body responds to what you put into it. That's what's in the book. There's tables and charts, more than 200 foods and recipes and meal plans to try to go with. And so you can buy that anywhere where books are sold. Because, you write a book, you try to put everything you can into it, but then the research continues on. I invite people to sign up to my free newsletter or to come to my master classes, which I do periodically every month. And just come to my website. My website's very easy to find. It's Dr. William Lee, Li.com, drwilliamlee.com. And just sign up. And, I'm starting this Eat to Beat Disease movement worldwide. I will tell you that in my masterclasses, I've had as many as 8,000 people attend a masterclass at a single time, sign up for a single one. I'm doing a deep dive Eat to Beat Disease course. I have 1,500 alumni for that course from 38 countries right now. And so part of my mission in life is to really share with people what I know that they can do for themselves, in which they can love their food and love their health at the same time.
Which I think is honestly amazing. The work that you're doing is helping so many people, including myself, my dad, the family, all those things. So I just want to personally say thank you so much for continuing to do this work. It is needed and is extremely helpful. Eat to Beat Disease. Go and get a copy of it. Go and sign up to the masterclasses. Your newsletters are quite informative too. So if you want more research and more science every single week, sign up to it as well. But I'll make sure everyone knows where to go for that. Dr. Lee, this is my all-time favorite question. I love asking all my guests at the very end. It is a hypothetical one, but I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of argument, but they've been able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
Wow. I guess because travel has been such an important part of my life, I would want there to be some reflection of my passion for understanding different parts of the planet and the people that live there. I think that we're all one. And that what makes us human is what makes us similar to one another, and that's really important to me. And I think that I would want people to know that I've been a scientist for as long as I can remember, and science is something that continuously offers promise beyond what we have today. And for anybody who wants hope for whatever it is, science is kind of dangling that just around the corner. So for scientists, that's what we go for. We're actually so motivated by that. And then I think the other thing is that, I'm somebody who really enjoys, I do enjoy food. And I believe that we should not fear our food. We should love our food. And when it comes to health, and that's another message that I want people to be able to learn from, a reflection of what I've done in my life.
It's a great send-off message for people. But Dr. Lee, thank you so much for joining me today on the Storybox podcast.
Thank you very much, Jay.